Hold on, I've just realised that I probably should learn how to pronounce the name of the document I'm going to be talking about.
Oh, yes, good luck.
Hold on.
Are you recording this, by the way? I want at least 5 takes.
Philogelos. Like philo pastry. Philogelos.
There you go. That's a teaser for the audience.
Easy.
To be fair, that was disappointing. You did that disappointingly well. Philogepopidoopidoops.
A boopity doopity doopity doop.
Falapidi-dappidi-doops.
Did you hear the Italian lady in the background teaching me?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. I googled how to pronounce Philogelos, and it came up with Philogelos.
Surely that should be a Greek lady.
Well, yeah, maybe it was. So, yeah, that Philogelos. So I always like to get that practiced, as you can tell from previous episodes.
Right, should we do an episode?
Let's do this.
Hello, and
we haven't done a countdown for a while, have we?
We haven't done a countdown.
I completely ruined that. Sorry. That was immaculate timing.
Should we do a countdown for old time's sake?
Yeah, why not? Let's go old school.
Cue music. 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome to That Was Genius, the little history podcast in which Tom, who's that man in New Zealand,
hello,
and Sam, this man in the UK, discuss history topics. Hello, I am Sam. I'm frightfully good looking. And everybody likes me. Discuss history topics.
So charismatic. So brave. So humble.
And so much more. Anyway, yes, hello and welcome to That Was Genius, the little history podcast in which Tom and I discuss topics on a theme each week. The topic is decided a week in advance, but everything else is a surprise. And following on from last week's laugh fest that was genocide, the topic this week is quite literally laughter.
Just to try and balance things out, yeah.
The yin to genocide's yang.
Yeah, we have made life easy for ourselves this week, because if we can't deliver something amusing to listeners this week, then what is the point?
Yeah, although I very nearly did something absolutely horrendous and then decided, no, that's awful, don't do that, it's a tragic and horrible tale.
Oh God, what's that then?
It's called Smiling Death Syndrome. And
Smiling Death Syndrome?
Yeah, and it's a disease that ravaged, I think it was Papua New Guinea, but I might be getting that wrong. There was a tribe in Papua New Guinea that had a disease which basically caused them to laugh hysterically and uncontrollably. And eventually their face would lock into a smile and they would die. And it was a form of CJD, mad cow disease, that they were getting through their funerary rites of eating the brains of the dead. So they were a cannibalistic tribe.
Yeah. And don't eat the brains, eat dead then. It's not rocket science.
Well, that's the thing. When Australia, who managed this particular territory, said, don't do this anymore, and they stopped doing it, basically the disease disappeared. But yeah, horrible. Yeah. I decided to do something much more fun, because because why would you do that in a topic about laughter? It's horrible.
Yeah, what exactly? Why would you, when given the opportunity to do something stupid and funny, why would you, do something horrendous and depressing?
So I corrected myself and found something. I'm going to put it out there. My story this week is absolutely hilarious.
Fantastic. Well, I started with hilarity. When I started pondering where I would go with this, I was inspired by that incident a couple of years ago when Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles couldn't stop themselves sniggering at a performance of Inuit throat singing on a visit to Canada. Did you see that?
I remember that, yes.
And so I wanted to research inappropriate laughter in history. And within seconds, I came across something a little bit different, which is what I'm going to discuss today. Very, very easy bit of research this week. I stumbled across the world's oldest joke book almost immediately.
Good. I suspect we've told a few jokes from that over the course of this podcast.
You say that, and it is remarkably modern with just a very classical twist to all of the jokes. I think you'll enjoy it.
I say, Oedipus's mum's so fat.
It's not far off. And the source does all the joking. I don't have to think up anything funny. All I've had to do is sift through 12,000 words, which is quite a lot of bad jokes, and pick out the good ones. That's all I've had to do this week.
Your poor wife.
Yeah. What do you think of this one?
Fantastic. Well, I'm hoping for some good Victorian translations and Victorian accents of rude jokes.
Yeah, there is a little bit of that.
With some moustache twiddling. Well, likewise, my story has pretty much written itself. I've had to do very, very little this week. It's just a fun, silly story.
Excellent. Well, that's set this up nicely, isn't it?
Hasn't it just?
Have we got anything incredibly amusing to flip?
Do you know what, Tom? Yes, we have. I've
got sellotape.
That's
No, not really very funny.
Hold on.
I've got a mouse that stopped working, and that's not the animal, that's the computer accessory.
Although, that is quite a funny way to describe a dead mouse. Hang on. Do you know what I have in front of me, Tom? The funniest thing you'll see this week. I've got a That Was Genius business card.
Nice! Where
Because
did
there's
you get
nothing
them printed?
funnier than us. So I went to this is the kind of cool guy I am. Yeah, ladies. I went to a podcast convention a couple of months ago. And and so I decided to have some cards printed off so that I could whore us out to other podcasts and potential sponsors and ting.
How many did you get rid of?
I think I got rid of about 100.
Were you just flicking them at people?
I did end up leaving some on tables, in bus stops.
Yeah, in telephone booths.
The cashier at the co-op when I bought my lunch.
Yeah. Tucked in strippers' knickers. Just anywhere close to hand.
Here's a tip for you, love.
Yeah.
Would you like the side that says, That Was Genius, the rather silly history podcast? Or would you like the side that has a QR code that I'm really smart, so you can just scan it on your phone and it opens us up in your favourite app?
That is awesome, Sam, because it's 2015, isn't it? Okay, let's go for the QR code. Because everyone uses QR code now.
Oh, man, I wonder how that Brexit vote's going to turn out. Which side do you want, you sarky twat?
I had a QR code put on my vehicle graphics on my car, and nobody has ever used it.
Who's gonna take a photo of your passing car?
When I'm parked up, someone might decide, oh, I saw that chap making some fat woman sweat in the park, shouting at her to do 5 more push-ups. I'm going to get in touch with that guy.
That's a sentence I'm glad ended the way it did. Wow, context is key. Right. Do you want the side with the slightly outdated QR code? Or do you want the side with our logo on it?
I'll go for the QR code.
Excellent. Here we go. Flipping. Oh, I win, Tom, and you're going to go first.
Boom. Well, I've kind of already introduced it, haven't I? I feel like I should take a few steps back and just explain a little bit about Inuit throat singing, because I did do a bit of research on it. And apparently, because for people who haven't seen this, Prince Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles are doing the royal thing, touring Canada, and there's a performance of Inuit throat singing, and they just cannot stop themselves laughing because these two Inuit ladies are basically going at each other. It is hilarious.
A bit like a fat woman in the park being told to do 5 more push-ups.
Yeah, it is awkward when I'm training people and they start making noises that sound a little bit like sex.
You should probably stop asking them to do hip thrusts.
Yeah, I know. Well, I do.
Glute bridges, quote unquote.
I have a back catalogue of group fitness class jokes, Sam, and that is one of them. Yeah, hip thrusters are an excellent glute exercise for anyone listening who's interested in developing great glutes. But you don't do it in a park with 12 people because it just becomes a bit of a call on me video. There are variations you can do that are far less sexual. Unfortunate because it is such a good glute exercise.
Tom, by the way, if you're a new listener, is a personal trainer.
Yes.
Again, context is everything.
Inuit throat singing isn't supposed to be taken seriously, apparently, so that clip of them laughing is actually a little bit taken out of context. Because it's actually, and I didn't realise this, thought it was quite interesting, it's a competition between 2 Inuit ladies to see who can last the longest keeping to a rhythm. And these contests usually end in a few minutes when either a lady can't keep up, or they make a mistake, or someone starts laughing. So it's kind of, it's supposed to be quite lighthearted.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Think of it as being not too dissimilar to the noble Norman game, still practised extensively in the English private school system, of biscuit de trompe, more commonly known as soggy biscuits. So,
I hope you made that up. I hope that's not got a Norman origin.
I don't think it has. I think it has an English private school origin. Soggy biscuit.
Talking about the Normans, I wasn't going to mention this, but you mentioned the Normans, so I am. There is a great story that I was considering talking about as an honourable mention today, featuring Rollo, the Viking / Norman founder, and Charles the Simple. And the Vikings and the French have been at it for a while, at war and things. And then Charles the Simple thought, oh, do you know what? What's a really good idea is I'll just give the Vikings some land. And I'll give them some land in northern France, and it'll be a great buffer, because then they'll protect me and we'll be friends. Do you know this story?
Yeah. Well, yes, it ends in the Norman Conquest.
Backtracking a little. So it comes to the swearing of fealty when Rollo swears fealty to, I'm pretty sure it was Charles the Simple. I don't have it in front of me. And the priests and the bishops around say, hello,
I'm Charles the Simple. And your name is?
No. We know how medieval namings work, Tom. He was a member of Mensa.
It was incredibly bright. Yes, exactly.
Yes. Well, he had this very good idea to give Rollo some land. And the priests and the bishops said, look, you're swearing fealty to this guy. It would be a sign of your faith to him if you kiss his feet. And Rollo said, fuck off, I'm not doing that. I'm a Viking warrior. But one of my men can do it. That's okay. So one of his lords came up, and instead of kneeling down to kiss Charles the Simple's feet, he just picked up his leg, kissed him and flipped him over.
How very Viking.
Yeah. Which apparently everyone, including the king, thought was hilarious. And a wonderful practical
Charles
joke.
The Simple, I'd be asking to try Rollo's toes, because I reckon they taste like caramel, sort of chocolate covered with a caramel centre.
You wouldn't want to eat the last one, though, would you?
No, you wouldn't.
You'd give that to someone you cared about. Which is a very niche reference to an old advertising campaign.
Yes, everyone had a good laugh at
at the flipping of Charles the Simple.
the flipping of a mentally disabled king. Excellent. Anyway, as mentioned, I rapidly stumbled across something better than inappropriate laughter.
What did you just drop?
Sorry, that was my pen. I haven't got a pen. I haven't got a clicky pen. I have a red pen that I've been using to highlight the best jokes in the oldest existing joke book, known as the Philogelos.
Excellent.
It might be quite well known to listeners, the Philogelos. I think it's reasonably well known, but I couldn't resist discussing
I've never heard of it.
Well, there, and you're the most intelligent person since Charles the Simple.
In this podcast. Yeah,
I know. Oh, damn you. God damn you, got one over on me. So, I couldn't resist discussing this book for two primary reasons. The first one is the jokes are basically very similar to 1970s stand-up, which is a cracking start. It was a cracking start. Talking of 1970s comedy, one of the best translations you can get online is in a PDF document, which includes commentary from Jim Bowen of Bullseye fame.
Let's have a look at what the Athenians could have won.
Yeah, let's have a look at what you could have won. A selection of prosthetic limbs and broken umbrellas from Waterloo train station. Oh, take a look at your prize. It's a Bullseye shopping spree at your local £1 shop. Splash out on over 3 items with your £4 voucher.
No change given.
I would love you, Sam, please, next week to put a link up to a wonderful video I found on YouTube. I'll send you the link, of a really shit prize from the British 1970s TV show based on darts called Bullseye. And the prize is a shopping spree at a top high street clothing retailer. And it's just got shit 80s clothing and 80s models prancing around in these sort of waist-high jeans and sort of blazers with huge shoulders. Very amusing.
Superb.
So yeah, I do think our American listeners need to see that. It's a bit of English culture.
Anyway, carry on.
To the history bit. So, the book is attributed to 2 chaps, Hierocles, and Philogelos, and their names translate roughly as cannon and ball. Or little and large.
Ronnie and Ronnie.
And again, I was wanting to make this less 1980s, 1970s British TV, and I couldn't think of any outdated comedy duos from the States that really haven't stood the test of time very well. And I'm sure there are some, but maybe our listeners can let us know. Basically, Cannon and Ball and Little and Large are fairly well-known average comedy pairings from the 70s that really haven't dated very well. The name Philogelos translates to love of laughter. So that's its literal translation.
Love of laughter.
It's from around the 4th century AD, and is from the Roman Empire, was originally written in Greek. It survives in a couple of manuscripts that are the better part of 1,000 years old, and there are a couple of translations as well. I've got a translation from 1919, so it has that sort of not quite Victorian, 1919, Edwardian, I suppose that would be, wouldn't it? But it adds this sort of slightly archaic commentary, which is quite amusing.
Excellent. That probably only adds to the joy of it.
Yes, exactly. The majority of the jokes are aimed at what are called scholasticos. Which
School
sounds
kids.
like basically students. I mean, it sounds like a sort of
sounds
American franchise football team, doesn't it? The San Andreas Scholasticos.
Scholasticos sounds like a disability.
Well, that's not... Yeah, that links nicely into what I was going to say, Sam, which is that the Scholasticos in this joke book are the butt of the majority of jokes. And it's the idea that these young men who spend too much time with their noses in books lose all common sense. That's all I'm going to say about it, Sam. I'm going to let the source do the rest of the talking. And as I've mentioned already...
It's literally now 15 minutes of you reciting your favourite jokes.
Exactly right. I've had to sift through a bad translation from 1919, 12,000 words worth, the majority of the jokes in it being crap. But I have managed to find some good ones. So let me start. I've probably got about 10 good ones, Sam. I narrowed it down to about... I had about 20 on the shortlist and narrowed it down to about 10 to 15.
That's very kind of you.
Let me start with this one. Quote, a certain person meeting... I should point out, in this translation, these scholasticos are called pedants, young males. A certain person meeting a pedant said, the slave you sold me died. Wait, hold on, there's a difficulty in the translation. Let me do that again.
All right, I was wondering if that was the punchline or not.
I'm going to come on to those in a moment, the ones that just make no sense.
I say, my slave's so dead. Is this just the dead parrot sketch? You sold me a dead slave. He's not dead, he's just sleeping.
You've jumped... Sam, that is remarkably... That's remarkably clever of you, because this joke in particular is seen as the original dead parrot joke.
Ah.
A certain person meeting a pedant said, the slave you sold me died. By the jests of Heracles, gods, replied the other, he never did such a thing when he was with me. And that's the joke.
Hey.
So this basically, it's the same joke as the dead parrot sketch. Here's another joke. This is number 19.
Told with expert comic timing. Looking at my wiggles, that was only a 5-second gap between joke and punchline.
Well,
the way you tell them, Tom.
I told you it was a difficult translation. Joke number 19. A pedant, seeing a flock of sparrows perching in a tree, spread out his cloak and shook the tree as though the sparrows would fall. There you go. That's kind of funny, isn't it?
God, I hope they get better.
Dong. Dong.
That went very Edgar Allan Poe.
It did, didn't it? Number 20. Where two pedants, after supper out, of politeness, escorted one another home in turn, and so did not get any sleep.
I do quite like that one.
It's not bad. See, some of them are quite good. Number 21. So there's a little cluster of half decent ones here. A pedant, desiring to sleep and not having a pillow, ordered his servant to place a jar under his head. When the servant said that it was hard, he commanded him to stuff it with feathers. There's a goodie. Right. Moving on. Let's skip forward a little bit to number 56. This is good because it involves a bald person. A pedant and a bald-headed man and a barber were travelling together, and pitching camp in a wild section they agreed that each one should stay awake for 4 hours and guard their possessions. It fell to the barber to watch first. Desiring to play a trick, he shaved the head of the sleeping pedant, and his watch being finished, he woke up the latter. The pedant, rubbing his head on awakening and finding himself bare, he said, "What a worthless fellow is that barber! He has made the mistake and wakened the bald-headed man instead of myself." Oh dear. Good work.
I think you need to do this in a 70s English comedian voice.
Okay, right. The next one I will.
Also, that was a classic Englishman, Irishman, Scotsman joke, wasn't it?
There's a lot of that. The Athenian, the Spartan, and the... I was about to say the Carolingian, but no, we know that's historically not true. Number 85. A peasant had moved into a new house. I wrote before the porch that had been cleaned, "Whoever throws filth here loses it." Do
that one again. I didn't quite pick up on that. Unless I just missed it, it's not that funny.
It's just not very funny. A peasant had moved into a new house and wrote before the porch that had been cleaned, quote, "Whoever throws filth here loses it." Obviously, thus encouraging people to throw their filth on his porch because people don't want their filth.
Yes.
Good one, that.
You are going to have to tell some good jokes to make up for these, you know. We are losing listeners left, right, and centre.
Okay. the pub is emptying quite rapidly.
Why did I let you go first?
Phew. Tough audience. This is my best work. Okay, there were two cowardly pedants. One hid himself in a well and the other in a clump of reeds. When the soldiers let down a helmet to draw out water, one thinking a soldier was coming to entreaties. When the soldier said that if he had kept quiet he would have been overlooked, the one hidden in the reeds, calling out, said, "Then pass me by, for I am keeping silent."
Hey!
Oh, fuck me.
Actually, that reminds me, I did some research into kind of funny newspaper articles. And I think it was the 1890s, there was a burglar in, I want to say, Oklahoma, who was caught sneaking around upstairs because the husband downstairs told his wife a joke. And apparently she didn't laugh, but the burglar upstairs found it hilarious. Burst out laughing.
Yeah, the only thing that would have made that better is if he was sneaking around someone's house at 2 a.m. and heard someone fart in bed. And started laughing hysterically.
There was another story, actually, of a similar vein, of a guy, only a couple of years ago, I think it was maybe 2008, could be making it up, who was high on bath salts, the formerly legal high, and broke into someone's house with the intention of burgling their house, started tripping balls, and instead got out all of their Christmas decorations and decorated their house for Christmas. It wasn't Christmas.
When and where was this?
This was a few years ago. I can't remember. It was somewhere in the US. I can't remember where. It was in a newspaper article I came across.
Christ, that's balmy, isn't it?
I've had a great week's research.
I did, yeah. 103. Yeah, well, I didn't because I've been sifting through this.
No, I like that. This is the best. Jesus.
I know there are some dreadful. Well, I'm going to do the dreadful stuff at the end.
Okay, can't wait.
Oh, okay. Here's a good one. Here's one of the ones that I even put an exclamation mark next to because I thought, oh, that's quite funny. So he's moved on from scholasticos, pedants, and he's now having a go at random ethnic minorities in the Roman Empire.
Hey, classic 70s fun.
Exactly. A citizen of Abdera, having heard that onions and turnips caused wind, and being on a voyage when there was great sea, having filled a sack, he hung it from the stem of the boat. Oh, shit. Hey. A man of Abdera was selling a dish without handles, brackets, ears. Being asked why it had no ears, he replied, lest hearing that it was to be sold, it might run away.
Hey!
That's good, isn't it?
No.
Here's another good one. 141. So I've probably told about 10 jokes. Yeah, there were about 131 that didn't make the cut. A witty helmsman asked what was raising the wind, replied, bean soup and onions.
Hey!
Hey! Oh, fuck me. Right. Oh, here are some classics. I've even written in the margin, classics.
Classics.
Quote, a witty fellow being asked by a chattering barber, how shall I cut it? He replied, in silence. Jesus Christ. A Cumean visiting a friend called him by name in front of the house. A companion saying, call out louder in order that he may hear. Forgetting the name which he knew, he shouted, louder.
Whee! That's the equivalent of a dad joke, isn't it? That really is.
These are all the equivalent of dad jokes.
That's the equivalent of, Dad, I'm hungry. Hi, hungry, I'm Dad.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. This has been highlighted as one that made the cut. 178. 2 Cummersons brought 2 dishes of dried figs. Each of the men secretly ate up the figs from the other's dish, and not from his own. When they had finished their business, each one turning to his own property found it empty. Taking hold of one another, they went to the judge, and the judge, hearing the case, ordered them to exchange excrements and to pay one another thereby.
At least the judge had a sense of humour.
Yeah, that raised a titter. Only a few left to go, Sam. You'll be pleased today. This is
Thank fuck.
This is in the chapter headed "About Those with Bad Breath."
This is worse than watching a Jim Davidson gig.
Watching a Jim Davidson DVD. This chapter is called "About Those with Bad Breath."
Finally, something I can relate to.
Joke 233, which is why we do
Fucking
this podcast
hell.
on other sides of the globe. 233. A person with bad breath meeting an acquaintance said, "Hail!" The other replied, "Phaw!" Upon his asking, "What did I say?" The other answered, "You broke wind." Another best bit about this is the translator's comment. The translation cannot convey the distinction made by the aspirate. I have endeavoured to indicate it in parentheses. Oh, dear. It's a bit of a pun. I think there are puns in this that don't translate well. Here's joke number...
Well, thank you, Edwardian literacist classicist, for putting in parentheses what the joke could not explain.
Yeah. A person with bad breath meeting a physician said, "My master, look whether my tonsils have not fallen down." And the physician, turning away, said, "Your tonsils are not gone down by any means, but your guts are coming up."
That's pretty good.
That's not bad, is it? It's getting better. A person with bad breath continually looking up to heaven prayed a great deal. Zeus, looking askance, said, "Do me one favour, you have gods down there too." Again, it's not bad, we're getting a bit better.
Yeah, they're slowly picking up. Turns out bad breath is where Roman humour really shines through.
And unfortunately, that's as good as it gets. There isn't a chapter of your mum jokes, unfortunately. That's kind of the standard we're working at here, isn't it?
Jesus.
Your mum's so fat. Oh, actually, I missed... I'll finish on a good one, Sam. This is a bit of a classic. This was number 3. This was one of the early ones.
Oh, wow.
A certain physician, coming to a pedant who was a physician, said, "Doctor, when I awake from sleep, I have dizziness for half an hour and then I recover." The physician replied, "Get up after half an hour then."
Oh, hey.
Hey, it's a Doctor joke.
Not a good one, is it?
Let's give you some shit ones. Shitter ones.
Really?
Let's give you some shitter ones.
What have I done to offend you, Tom? Why have you...
A pedant was looking for his book for many days but could not find it. By chance, as he was eating lettuces and turned a certain corner, he saw the book lying there. Later, meeting a friend who was lamenting the loss of his girdle, he said, "Do not worry, but buy some lettuces and eat them at the corner. When you turn it and go a little ways, you will find it." Cracking.
Yeah.
That's a goodie, isn't it? I've gone for a lot here, Sam, so that you can cut out as many as you like. So
this is going to be a very short section for you, then. 2 jokes about bad breath and we're done.
3 minutes.
Wow, Tom, I can't believe that your section lasted only 2 minutes and 35 seconds.
A pedant was tying on some new sandals. When they squeaked, he paused and said, "Do not squeak, or you will injure your 2 legs." Let me read that one out again, because that's so good. What? A pedant was tying on some new sandals. When they squeaked, he paused and said, "Do not squeak, or you will injure your 2 legs." Oh, dear.
I don't know what I'm like. Why is that funny? That one is funny, but I don't know why.
Because it's shit. It just doesn't make any sense.
I mean, life in the Roman Empire must have been really shit if people were rolling around in the aisles for this. Bear in mind, I mean, you said that 2 manuscripts of this had survived, which means that at some point someone's found this funny enough to keep it stored away and not use it as bog roll. In fact, this has happened not only once but twice.
Maybe the monks were doing it as some form of self-flagellation, reciting these jokes over and over again after they thought about a lady's boobies, just as a sort of punishment.
Speaking of monks having a sense of humour and self-flagellation, there's another practical joke which I was going to mention and didn't, which is in the 1400s, and a monk called Thomas Bettson found a slightly rotten apple and found a beetle and hid the beetle in the rotten apple and put it kind of like so the whole side was down, and then summoned the other monks and said, "Behold, this apple is possessed by a demon," and it was like rocking backwards and forwards because there was a beetle in it. And nice. So they did an exorcism on the apple.
Nice. A pedant taking the character of a gladiator was playing before the house. Suddenly someone announced to him that his father was close by. He threw aside his weapon and undid his leggings. But his father arriving and standing by him, he opened a book and began to read, still having the helmet on. I think the joke there is he forgot to take his helmet off. Which is just cracking, isn't it? Really funny.
I mean, to be fair, that's still used as a visual gag in like every sitcom ever. When someone comes in and someone's doing something they shouldn't, they kind of slide it away, but they've still got, I don't know, a little bit of semen around the corner of their mouth, whatever. We watch different sitcoms.
Yes. Here's a nice little Edwardian translator's note. The joke is a trifle obscure. There we go. Oh, good. How many people have tuned out so far?
All of them. Just all of them.
Everyone's gone. They've all gone. We've never had such a thing happen. Oh, well, I think this might be the last one, Sam.
Oh,
Although,
fuck.
I suspect you can cut out quite a lot.
When will this end?
An envious fellow, seeing his neighbour fighting with a wild beast, said to the guide, "I wager on the bear."
Yep. That's not really a joke, it's just kind of cruel. I hope my neighbour gets killed, isn't it?
By the bear, yeah.
Yeah.
The translators put in here, the text is hopelessly corrupt. I cannot understand why the guide should be standing idly by if the bear was overcoming his opponent. So even the Edwardian translator of this is struggling hopelessly to try and find any humour in it. And I would just like to point out, let me try and find how many jokes exactly were in here. It was well in the 200s. And the ones that I just read out were the best.
Wow.
There are about 240 jokes in here, and I've read out the best ones. So, Sam, there you go.
Fucking hell.
So, I think it was the famous Edward Gibbon who said that if he could choose a time to live, it would have been in the 1st century Roman Empire. Well, he obviously had no sense of humour because there really wasn't much going on.
Yeah.
That was the stand-up comedy.
I mean, you're talking about a time when hilarity ensued from throwing persecuted religious minorities to lions.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, actually, that was later, but still, throwing slaves to lions, whatever. Humour was different times.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's a trend. You can see some similarities in these jokes.
You can. The same things have clearly been found funny for many, many, many years.
People with bad breath and ethnic minorities.
Yeah. For example.
I mean, all the pedant jokes are basically Irishman jokes, aren't they?
Yes.
And every
culture
has its Irishman jokes.
Yes, everyone has a minority who they think are stupid.
Yeah, and so they're always the butt of the jokes being done. For example, an Englishman, an Irishman, a Scotsman walk into a magical cave, and they find a big slide, and there's a sign saying, "Oh,
this is my favourite joke from school.
Who fall down this slide shall land in whatever they desire, so long as they shout out what they desire on the way down the slide." And so the Englishman climbs to the top and says, "Oh, this is going to be great. I bet this won't work." And he goes down the slide, and as he's going down the slide, he shouts, "Gold!" And lo and behold, he lands in a pit of gold. And he thinks, "Christ, it did work."
Oh, I have now broken my coccyx.
Yeah. The second Scotsman goes up and goes, "Well, I'm going to have a go at this." And he slides down and he shouts, "Diamonds!" Ooh. And he lands in a pool of diamonds. I know, that would hurt, wouldn't it?
It's like standing on upturned Lego.
Yeah. The Irishman, who wasn't really paying attention, goes to the top and just thinks, "Oh, I like slides." And he slides down and he goes, "Whee!"
Hey,
there you have it.
Growing up in the 80s, that was my favourite joke at school.
Classic primary school joke.
Yep.
Well, I think
absolutely.
I should hand over the reins to you, Sam, because I don't know how you're going to follow that, to be honest.
Oh, well, I'm going to have to wake myself up first.
That was quite a warm-up act, really, wasn't it?
That was quite the opener, yes.
We're at 52 minutes in the recording, so hopefully you can get a good 20 minutes rid of that.
I think I can. Incidentally, audience, Tom will be going live at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival this year with his tour, "The Old Ones Are the Best."
The oldest
a collection
ones
of
are the best.
Yes, that was the joke. A collection of historical humour.
Beautiful jokes from the Roman Empire.
Oh God. Well, Tom, in contrast to yours, I have found an absolute doozy today. I'm going to be talking about a practical joke so audacious it caused a national scandal and also caused London to grind to a halt for a day, as well as causing a lot of annoyance to pretty much everyone at the same time.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's brilliant. But first, I do have a couple of honourable mentions. As you can tell already by my interruptions, I've had a really good week for research. Firstly, honourable mention goes to the Roman Emperor Elagabalus. Elagabalus?
Was he a very late one?
No, not at all. He came to power in 218 AD.
Ooh.
So kind of a middle-aged Roman. Like all Roman emperors, he was a measured sort of a chap.
A lot of the Roman emperors weren't very measured.
No. No, they weren't. That's part of the joke.
Oh, right, I see. Sorry, I'm sorry. My head's been in this document for so long, I've lost my sense of humour. Sorry.
Yeah. So he was only 14 when he took the throne in 218 AD, and he liked to play fun, practical jokes. On one occasion, drowned a load of people under rose petals.
Right.
Also, liked to hire himself out as a prostitute for a joke.
What?
Yeah.
Who to?
Anyone, literally anyone who would pay him, he would sneak out and pretend to be a common prostitute.
Just to drunk Brits?
Yeah.
On a stag do? What?
He'd ride his chariot out to Amsterdam.
They go, ha ha, oh, the laugh's not really on me, is it? The laugh's on you because you're the one that's just sucked me off.
I'm the Roman Emperor. Turns out, I'm the Roman Emperor.
And I just sucked you off. You just bummed me, but I'm a Roman Emperor. Yeah. Laughs on you, just like all the seamen.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
See what's funny? Joke. You'd never guess who told me this one. It was a chap who wrote Philogelos, or whatever it's called.
The funny thing is, you've just given me 2 sesterces to suck you off, and now I've got 2 sesterces. I don't need it. That's my face on it. And that's you on my face.
You know what's even funnier? I usually charge 1 sesterce. Overcharged.
Yes, anyway, in a lighter moment when he wasn't literally whoring himself out, he invented the Whoopee Cushion, Tom.
Did he?
Yeah, he did. He had some guests round for dinner one night, and he had them all sit on inflated leather bags, which at inopportune moments during the evening, he had his slaves come out and pull the plugs out. Which is actually pretty funny.
Sounds very much like spoilt 14-year-old brat who hasn't grown up, but he's the emperor, so nobody's telling him off. For
very much so, yeah. Well, they didn't tell him off, but they did kill him after 4 years. He was assassinated in 222 AD, aged 18, so he clearly pissed enough people off. The Whoopee Cushion was funny the first time. By the 50th time, it's like, no, Brutus, you sit on the cushion. Oh, please, Emperor, I don't want to. We've done this 5 times already tonight. No, sit on the cushion.
Sit on the cushion. It's really, really funny.
It's very comfortable. You'll like it. Sit on the cushion. I am the Emperor, and I am telling you to sit on the cushion.
Gaius, go and pull out the plug. Go on, do it now.
What's that, Brutus? You don't find it funny? Do you not find me funny, Brutus? Yes, Emperor. Yes, Emperor, I find you. Ha, ha, ha. Ha, very, very funny. Could I go home now? My wife's been wondering where I am for the last 5 days.
You think I'm funny, do you? You think your Emperor's funny?
Am I like a joke to you?
Am I like a clown to you, am I?
Do I look like a clown?
Well...
Do you see me laughing? Be very careful when you open your cupboards tonight, Brutus. So my next honourable mention is for, I think, genuinely one of the greatest biological warfare pranks of all time. Which is better than it sounds. It's not a fart in a can, Tom. It's a giant shit on the lawn.
Giant shit on the lawn.
In the late 1790s, I'm not sure exactly when, an Oxford University geology student called William Buckland was experimenting with guano, or bat shit. Anyone who's ever watched Ace Ventura Pet Detective 2 will know very much what guano is.
Is that different to guava?
Guava is a fruit, guano is bat shit. It's what bats would eat, possibly.
Don't eat guava. No, do eat guava.
Do eat guava, don't eat guano.
Yeah, okay.
Although actually William Buckland did, he is recorded as having eaten guano on several occasions. He was very good at examining poo by eating it and telling you what it was from. Anyway, eventually...
Lucky he wasn't part of the university rugby team, because they would have had a whale of a time with him.
Oh, but he was. Yeah. So eventually guano would come to be one of the greatest known natural fertilisers. It still is, and wars would literally be fought over the supply of this stuff. But right now it was just being discovered by the Europeans. And so one night, having got hold of a big bag of the stuff, Buckland snuck out and painted the word guano in huge letters on Tom Quad, which is the big, immaculately kept lawn in front of Oxford's Christ Church College. The next morning, the college staff very quickly noticed that someone had dumped a massive bag of shit on the lawn and very quickly cleared away the poo. But even after just a few hours on the lawn, the fertiliser was so effective that for the next several years, the grass where guano had...
There's a massive knob and balls.
Well, yes, pretty much.
Missed opportunity.
Well, for the next few years, the word guano grew 3 times as fast as everything else on the lawn. So every couple of weeks, the word would visibly reappear in several foot-high letters on this lawn.
And the groundsman was like, bloody...
And the groundsman had to go and re-snip the word shit.
Today I've had the lawnmower out.
Yeah, had to go and re-snip the word bat shit off the lawn.
I've been shitting all over the fucking rest of the lawn for 3 weeks now to try and fertilise. It's still not fucking growing.
Well, they did. They tried literally everything, including fertilising the rest of the lawn so it all grew quicker, but nothing was as efficient as guano. And they couldn't get hold of any more of it. So the only way they could have gotten rid of these giant letters would be to dig out a giant patch of the lawn and reseed it, which the groundskeeper couldn't bear to do. So for the next few years, a giant batshit on the lawn appeared every 2 weeks.
Nice.
Which is a brilliant practical joke.
It did miss the opportunity of just doing a big cock and balls.
He did. I'd like to think that being an educated man, he was slightly above that, but I suspect he wasn't.
No.
I suspect he was just out to prove the fertilising properties of the product guano, which actually, I mean, it worked.
Yeah, it sounds like it worked very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be like drawing baby bio in giant letters on a cricket pitch these days.
It reminded me, and I may have regaled everyone with this hilarious anecdote on a previous occasion. I must have been about 14 at school. And we were asked to help the local sort of charitable organisation to go and plant daffodils.
I haven't heard this story, Tom, but I think I know where it's going.
Exactly. And me and some of my friends were very enthusiastic about collecting up lots of daffodil bulbs to plant because we positioned ourselves along the main road into my hometown in the UK and planted swear words in all the daffodils. And it's a slow burning joke, isn't it? Because you've got to wait for spring for arse cheese to appear in the daffodils.
Oh, but so worth it.
And you can only see it from the top deck of a bus.
Which is where all the kids are, so clearly.
Arse cheese! So yes,
Excellent.
Great minds think alike.
Excellent. See, humour never changes, does it? The same things are funny years later.
Exactly.
Bat shit and arse cheese.
Yep.
So anyway, Tom, on to my main story for today. And genuinely, I think this is one of the favourite historical happenings I've ever talked about on this podcast. It's the Berners Street Hoax of November 26th, 1810. Have you ever heard of this, Tom?
No, I haven't.
This practical joke. It's very, very good. Now, for background, by 1810, London was the biggest and wealthiest city in Europe by quite some margin, and probably up there among the biggest and wealthiest in the world. Had a population of over 1 million and was the hub for trade and industry. You could buy or hire pretty much anything or anyone you liked. And this hoax involves someone who did hire anyone and anything. And a woman, an innocent victim, who very
surprise! It's the Emperor!
It's me!
I've just cleaned all your toilets, and guess what? I'm the Emperor! Ha ha! Oh, thanks for cleaning my toilets. That's nice of you. The laugh's on you! Okay.
Because I'm the Emperor, but I cleaned your toilet! That is funny!
I did it for free! Ha ha ha!
How embarrassing for you! Do you know what the problem is? Audiences today, Tom, they just don't get humour. So, yes, anyway. So getting back to this story involves someone who did hire anything and everything, and a woman who very much did not. So, at 5 a.m. on the morning of the 26th of November, a Mrs. Tottenham, or Mrs. Tottingham, it's written in different ways in different sources, was sat at home at 54 Berners Street in central London. She was a wealthy lady in a big house in a nice part of the city. And there was a knock on the door, Tom. No one was expected to be calling, so her maid was very surprised when she opened the door to see a chimney sweep. She hadn't called for one, and so she sent him away. You all right back there? Do you know where this is going?
Oh God, I have a feeling I do know where it's going.
At 5:05, another knock on the door, Tom. It's another chimney sweep. And another, and another, and another. Once 12 chimney sweeps had turned up and been turned away...
And started reciting Chimney. Berner Street, step in time. Berner Street, step in time. Don't need a reason, don't need a rhyme. Berner Street, step in time. What is this? Why is my street outside my house turned into a Mary Poppins recital group?
Yes. Chim chimney, chim chimney, chim chim chiroo. I've got a dozen sweeps for you. So
how many chimneys do you have?
None. Fuck off. And the rest of you. So, once 12 chimney sweeps had turned up and been sent away, Tom...
Danced back down the street, yeah.
The merchants began to arrive.
Right.
Here's a quote from the London Annual Register. Wagons laden with coals from the Paddington's wharves arrived. Upholsterers' goods in cartloads. Organs, pianofortes, linen, jewellery, and every other description of furniture.
Right.
Now, Tom, none of this had been ordered, but every single person was turning up with a letter requesting their presents. And there were more, Tom. And more and more and more tradesmen began to turn up at the door of this random woman. Quote, 6 men bearing a church organ, wine porters with permits, barbers with their wigs, and opticians with various articles of trade.
Right.
Several cake makers turned up, Tom, each of whom had made a wedding cake. 100 bakers turned up with 500 raspberry tarts.
This is just sounding like a Disney film.
It is, isn't it? It's very Fantasia. A load of doctors were called in, each to deal with a number of increasingly serious ailments. And as soon as one turned up and went, the next one arrived, followed by a priest to give the lady of the house her last rites, and after him, a funeral cortege with a made-to-measure coffin.
Weird. What?
A dozen pianos were delivered. Portrait artists arrived, Tom. Dentists arrived. People turned up with live chickens, and someone herded several cows up the road.
Why has this not been turned into a musical?
Oh, well, that's a very good point, Tom, and we'll come to that later. But it really should be. It really should be, yeah.
Be my guest, be my guest.
Bring your organs and your chests. I am very, very poorly, and I need a portrait oily.
Bring 10 doctors, bring 10 doctors.
And a wig for my hotels who have just been delivered to me from a man in Normandy. And I have 60 cakes. Bring your friends and their dates. We will have a lovely party all the night. No one of you are invited, but come in or shite. Be my guest, be my guest, be my guest.
Have you finished?
I have. I thought that was rather good considering I made it up on the spot.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
So, after the tradesmen had all turned up, Tom, the great and good of London started to arrive. All called at the address to meet with the lady of the house at her request. And because it was a nice part of London and therefore she was clearly a lady of means, all of the people who'd been invited turned up. The Governor of the Bank of England arrived.
That's a lot of cups of tea, the poor...
That's a lot of cups of tea for the maid to make. Unfortunately, someone had just delivered 500 china cups and an entire clipper's worth of tea. Yeah. So, not only the Governor of the Bank of England...
16 slaves that she could use to do it.
Yeah. The Duke of York turned up, Tom. The Lord Mayor of London turned up. The Archbishop of Canterbury arrived at the door.
How could you persuade these people to turn up?
Because she was a well-known lady of means, and she'd sent a letter requesting their urgent attendance on a matter of business, and because it was a nice part of London, all of these people kind of lived 2 or 3 doors up.
They all will pop by.
And just thought they'd pop by. And so all of these people turned up, and all of them were clamouring to get through the traffic of whoever all of these other people in the street were to get to their appointment.
Along the street saying, what the fuck is going on here? 17 pigs have just walked past.
Yes. Absolutely. There was a huge, huge traffic jam, and none of these people knew that the others had all arrived to get to the same house. So everyone was basically there was a huge fight trying to get to this poor woman's front door. In all, almost every single tradesman in London had been called out by some stranger to 54 Berners Street. Mrs. Tottenham was absolutely terrified, understandably, and locked herself inside, as presumably was her maid. Everyone outside was furious, and literally almost every cart, hackney carriage and professional in London was packed into one small street, and no one could move an inch. And obviously at this point thousands of people came out to watch, which didn't help either. Eventually, the police had to be called in to cordon off almost all of central London.
Meanwhile,
according to
London's burglars were having a whale of a time. All the police...
No, because they'd all been called to Berners Street on the tip off that the lady was on holiday.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I imagine they probably did have
the
a field
burglar
day.
bill outfits. Black and white stripes, bags of swag.
That's an eye toothbrush. I'll have that.
Yeah.
So according to the London Morning Post, quote, every officer that could be mustered was enlisted to disperse the people, and they were placed at the corners of Berner Street to prevent more tradespeople from advancing towards the house with goods. The street wasn't cleared until a late hour, as servants of every denomination wanting places began to assemble at 5 o'clock. So it turns out that not only had they written letters to every tradesperson in London, they'd also put out job adverts saying that there was a position going. So after all of the tradespeople had piled in, all of the great and good of London, 500 unemployed people turned up wanting a job.
Fought their way through the elephants.
yeah, the circus that had rocked up.
The wedding cakes.
Yeah. So, quote again, it turned out that letters had been written to the different tradespeople which stated recommendations from persons of quality, saying basically, please come to this house and deliver XYZ to us. A reward has been offered for the apprehension of the author of this criminal hoax. So, all of this had been carefully choreographed to make sure that different people turned up at different times through the day to cause maximum disruption and hilarity. And when the police investigated, it turns out that someone had printed thousands of identical calling cards that just had blank spaces for the name, profession and goods that had been requested. They'd simply filled them in and sent them off around the city, presumably at huge cost in money and time to themselves to have all of these printed and delivered.
Oh, but worth it.
A lot of work for a prank on a poor random woman.
Where was this person observing it from? Because surely you'd have to observe it to enjoy it.
Well, yes, the perpetrator, who was eventually found, and we'll come on to that, was watching from a room across the road. And no one could work out who'd done it or why. The newspapers for the next few weeks were rocked by rumour and scandal about the hoax. There was apparently some political intrigue linking all of the dignitaries who turned up. There was some kind of fraud at the bank that various people had been involved in. And they'd showed up in the order in which things were unfolding at the bank. There was apparently some greater message spelt out from what had been ordered and who had turned up when, and there was some code to it all. The event even made it into skits in music halls and the penny gaffs, which obviously we've discussed in this podcast before. There were penny gaff performances about the Berners Street hoax. And whilst all the newspapers were pretty quick to shake their heads and tut at this waste of time and money, they all obviously also found it incredibly funny.
Yeah.
Like, everyone was absolutely pissing themselves at this. But no one knew who'd done it. By 1812, though, so 2 years later, a name had sprung up and was circulating in the press. And that name was Theodore Hook, who was a young socialite, a writer of musicals, hence being turned into a musical, and a notorious prankster who had a habit of selecting his victims at random and knew all of the gossip and scandal of London. Years later, he never said anything about it at the time. He never commented and was never charged with it. But in the 1830s, he eventually admitted that it had been him all along, and he wrote about it in a semi-autobiographical novel he wrote called Gilbert Gurney. And he wrote in this, "There's nothing like fun. What else made the effect in Berners Street? I am the man. I did it. I sent a Lord Mayor in state. I released impressed seamen. Philosophers and sages came to look at children with two heads apiece.
He released his impressed seamen?
Well, Tom, he did hire every tradesman in London.
Yeah. Hello!
I'm your friendly neighbourhood.
Sorry, carry on with your quote, sorry.
Pianofortes were delivered by the dozens and coal wagons by scores. 2,500 raspberry tarts from 100 pastry cooks, a squadron of surgeons, a battalion of physicians, a legion of apothecaries, lovers to see their sweethearts, ladies to find their lovers, upholsterers to furnish houses and architects to build them, gigs, dog carts and glass coaches, enough to convey half the freeholders of Middlesex into Brentford. Nay, I dispatched even royalty itself on an errand to a respectable widow, whose concourse of visitors, by my special invitation, choked up the avenues of London and found employment for half the police of the metropolis. So he loved it. He had a brilliant time. In fact, what he'd done is he'd rented a room opposite the house, and with a few friends enlisted to help him, he'd written 4,000 letters in a week before the prank, and then just spent the day getting horribly drunk and watching the chaos and giggling to himself.
Yeah. I wish it would. That would be incredibly entertaining.
Yeah, I know, right?
It would be brilliant.
But why had he done it, Tom? Apart from just for fun, why had he done it?
Why had he picked on this lady?
Picked her at random. Absolutely at random.
Bloody weird. I don't know. Why did he do it?
Well, Tom, a week beforehand, he'd been walking down the street with a friend of his, and he decided to make a bet. And he pointed at 54 Berners Street and told his friend, "I'll lay you a guinea that in 1 week that nice modest dwelling there shall be the most famous house in all of London." So it was literally just a drunken bet with a friend, and as he was walking past. And he hatched this master plan.
This could easily be replicated, couldn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, to be fair, it wasn't the first time it had been done. This was kind of, on this scale, it was absolutely unheard of, but it was kind of a known form of petty revenge.
Yeah.
If someone had ripped you off or annoyed you, to send like 10 chimney sweeps round to their house. In London at the time, it was quite well documented that, if you'd been ripped off by a quack doctor, you'd send him 30 dentists or something like this. But never before on this scale. Never before on this scale.
That could escalate, couldn't it? Because then those 30 dentists get annoyed that they've been sent, and they send 50 shoemakers back to the person
Absolutely, yes.
who sent them.
Before you know it. It's just a pyramid scheme. That's how they kept the economy of London going at the time, just this massive pyramid scheme.
Pyramid scheme of
if I send 2 people to annoy someone, and each of them sends 4 people to annoy someone, before long we'll all be millionaires.
It's a GCSE maths question, isn't it? Yeah.
So there we go, Tom. The whole thing was just a funny practical joke by a bored socialite with nothing better to do. And it's fair to say he got his guinea back. It probably cost him several £100 to arrange the prank.
Worth every penny.
But he won, and that's the most important thing. And I'm going to be honest, I think that's probably one of the greatest practical jokes in history.
That would be incredibly fun to watch, though, wouldn't it?
Oh, wouldn't it just?
That would be hilarious. You know how funny it is when you play a little prank on someone and you'll sit and watching and giggling and the prank unfolds. And I'm not talking silly pranks like pretending someone's child has just been murdered.
A fart machine or something.
Yeah, not like a stupid prank, but a genuinely funny prank. That would be absolutely hilarious to watch that just unfold all day.
Oh yeah, I mean to have orchestrated
chaos.
it, like you wouldn't have slept a wink the night before, would you? You'd have been pacing the room, going, "Come on, when's the first chimney sweep coming? Come on, come on, bring it home to Daddy." I genuinely think I probably would have had a heart attack from laughing if I'd arranged that with watching it all day. I wouldn't have been able to stop myself.
Especially if it escalated. If it started off with 12 chimney sweeps and ended up with 15 circuses. And it just slowly got sillier and sillier and sillier.
I love it. What a lad. What an absolute lad. I mean, poor Mrs. Tottenham, she didn't ask for any of this. She probably fainted and had to have bath salts waved in her face in that Victorian lady kind of way. But bloody marvellous.
Very good. You've more than made up for my list of the worst jokes of all time.
Well, we should probably think of something to talk about next week, shouldn't we?
Oh, we had a listener mention something.
We had a listener? Fuck! Sound the alarm! Ding, ling, 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 ling! It's happened, Tom. It's finally happened.
I got rid of her soon enough.
Yeah, she didn't hang around.
B. Danks, who was listening to us in traffic and thought it was very funny.
Thank you so much for your kind notice, by the way.
Yes,
your kind notice? How Victorian of me. Your nice message.
Your kind notice. Okay, notice. She suggested religious fuck-ups in history.
Yes, I like that.
I reckon we should give it a couple of weeks. I think it's a very good suggestion, but I was quite mean about religions last week. I think we should give that one a couple of weeks.
let the dust settle.
Yeah. What I thought...
Fair enough.
I don't know what you think about this, But we've been going on about the Frenchies quite a lot recently. I think we should bring things back into balance, and we could maybe do kick-ass Frenchies.
Kick-ass Frenchies, okay.
Top blokes. No, how do you say top blokes in a French accent? Top blokes from France.
Les grands monsieur.
Very good, très bien. Yes, less Monsieur derrière and more Monsieur le Capitaine. I don't even know what Capitaine means.
Yes. Le chef du French.
What are we talking about?
I think let's do Frenchman.
Yeah, kick-ass Frenchies. Okay, sounds good.
Awesome. Right, well, look forward to that next week. Thank you so much in the meantime for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed this episode.
Half of this episode.
Do check it out on social media. We are on Facebook, That Was Genius Podcast, Twitter, _was_genius, and Instagram, That Was Genius. You can also send us an email with nice or horrible words, fun things you've eaten.
Have you had any horrible
I don't know,
emails?
whatever you like. We've never had a horrible email from a listener. Don't take that as an invitation or a challenge.
Exactly.
But you can email us, thatwasgeniuscast@gmail.com. So it only leaves us to say good night, goodbye, and if the doorbell rings in the night, it wasn't me.
Hello, I've come
Hello.
to paint your ceilings.
Whilst I do this, sit on my cushion. By command of your ceiling painter.
Oh, I let it slip by funny prank.
Right. Say goodbye, Tom.
See you later.
Bye.